Imagine walking into a five-star hotel, drenched from the rain, exhausted from travel, and being turned away. Not because there were no rooms, but because the staff thought you did not look wealthy enough. What they did not know was that the man they mocked, the guest they humiliated, owned every single hotel in that chain. What happened next would leave the entire staff trembling, the manager speechless, and the world watching. This is not just a story about power. It is a story about humility, respect, and the shocking. A moment that turned a luxury hotel upside down overnight. Stay with me, because the twist you are about to hear will change the way you see status. Forever. Asterisk. The rain poured heavily that night. Drumming against the sleek glass windows of the luxury hotel, golden lights shimmered inside the grand lobby, reflecting off polished marble floors. Guests walked in and out with umbrellas dripping, their laughter echoing softly under the high ceiling. A man stepped through the revolving door, his coat soaked, his shoes squeaking against the pristine tiles. He was tall, with streaks of silver in his neatly combed hair, and eyes that carried a quiet authority. But his suit was simple, worn from travel, and the mud stains on his trousers stood out in the elegant room. The receptionist glanced up from the counter, her bright smile faltering. Her gaze swept over him, from his wet coat to his old leather bag, and her expression shifted to irritation. "May I help you?" she asked, her voice clipped and polite. "I need a room," the man said calmly, placing his identification on the counter. The receptionist barely glanced at the card before sliding it back. "I am sorry, sir. We are fully booked," she said, her tone carrying a hint of disdain. The man's brows lifted slightly, his expression unreadable. He turned his head, scanning the empty lounge chairs, the vacant tables in the restaurant, the quiet bar where bartenders polished glasses out of boredom. "It seems very quiet for a fully booked hotel," he said softly. Her face stiffened, and she forced another smile. "Perhaps you would prefer somewhere more affordable," she said. Her colleague behind the counter chuckled under his breath, trying to hide it with a cough. The man's fingers drummed gently on the counter, the sound sharp against the marble. The manager appeared from a hallway, adjusting his tie as he walked over. He looked the man up and down, his frown deepening. "I believe my staff has already informed you," the manager said coldly. "We are at capacity." The man's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "I see," he said, stepping back slightly. A bellboy near the elevator whispered to a maid, and they both watched him with curious smirks. The man glanced around the lobby again, his gaze lingering on a large gold-framed portrait near the front desk. It was a painting of himself, younger, with fewer lines on his face, but the same piercing eyes. The receptionist followed his gaze, confusion flickering across her face. She looked at the portrait, and at him, her smile faltering. The man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek black card. Embossed with a silver logo, he set it on the counter with deliberate precision. The receptionist's breath caught as she read the words printed on it. Her hands trembled as she looked up, her face pale. The manager stepped closer, snatching the card, his expression twisting in shock. His eyes darted from the name on the card to the man standing calmly in front of him. "Sir, this is Stame. The man tilted his head slightly, his voice still even. "Yes," he said. "I own this hotel chain." The entire lobby seemed to freeze. The bellboy dropped a suitcase with a loud thud. The maid covered her mouth, her wide eyes darting to the portrait again. The receptionist's smile vanished completely, replaced by sheer terror. The manager's hands trembled as he quickly bowed his head. "Please forgive us, sir," he said, his voice shaking. The man said nothing, only slipped the card back into his pocket with a slow, measured movement. The sound of rain outside seemed louder, echoing through the tense silence in the lobby. He glanced once more at the golden lights, the marble floors, and the staff who stood frozen in fear. His expression was unreadable as he turned slightly, his presence commanding the entire room without a word. The man's gaze swept over the staff, lingering on each terrified face. No. One moved. Even the sound of the revolving door turning felt deafening in the heavy silence. He adjusted his coat slowly, the gesture calm yet commanding. "Tell me," he said softly, his voice low but carrying. "Across the lobby, is this how you treat every guest who walks in from the rain?" The receptionist swallowed hard, her lips parting but no words coming out. The manager straightened his tie again, his hands still trembling. "Sir, I assure you this was a misunderstanding," he stuttered. The man's eyes narrowed. "A misunderstanding," he repeated, the weight of his words pressing down on the staff like a storm cloud. He stepped forward, the sound of his polished shoes echoing sharply on the marble. "Would you like me to explain this misunderstanding," he said, "to every regional manager? To every shareholder? Or perhaps to every employee in this chain?" The color drained from the manager's face. Guests seated in the lounge turned their heads, sensing tension crackling in the air. A couple whispered nervously, their eyes darting between the man and the staff. The receptionist's knees seemed to buckle slightly as she gripped the counter for support. The man reached for the bell at the desk and rang it once, the clear chime cutting through the lobby like a blade. "Get the general manager here," he ordered calmly. The manager flinched, but nodded, hurrying toward the staff offices. The receptionist stammered, "Sir, if you would like, we can prepare the presidential suite for you." Immediately, the man's expression hardened. "I do not want a room," he said, his voice steady but sharp. The staff exchanged nervous glances. Unsure of his next words, he turned his head slowly, looking at the bellboy, the maid, and the bartenders, who had been whispering earlier. Each of them straightened immediately, fear flickering in their eyes. The man moved toward the center of the lobby, his presence alone commanding silence. He stopped under the grand chandelier, the golden light cascading over him like a spotlight. "Gather every staff member in this hotel," he said. "Now." The receptionist hesitated for a moment and scrambled to make calls. The soft ringing of the desk phone filled the tense space as the man stood silently, his eyes fixed on the golden-framed portrait of himself. The rain outside grew heavier, the rhythmic sound against the windows making the silence inside even sharper. Guests were whispering, phones raised discreetly, capturing glimpses of the scene. Within minutes, staff members hurried into the lobby, their faces pale and tense. Housekeepers clutched their aprons. Concierges stood stiffly, hands clasped in front of them. Even the kitchen staff emerged, wiping their hands nervously on their uniforms. All eyes were on the man who now stood at the heart of the hotel's opulence, the one they had turned away moments earlier. His gaze moved slowly across the group, each employee shrinking under his piercing stare. No one dared speak. The manager returned, breathless, with the general manager trailing behind him. The general manager's face paled as soon as he saw the man standing there. He froze, his voice breaking. "Sir, I did not know you were coming," he said. The man finally spoke, his tone calm but carrying a sharp edge that cut through the silence. "Neither did your staff," said. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The general manager lowered his head, shame washing over his face. The man took one slow step forward, his shoes clicking against the marble, a sound that made the entire group flinch. The man's voice dropped lower, yet it carried to every corner of the lobby. "This hotel," he said slowly, "was built on a promise that every guest would be treated with respect." His eyes moved across the trembling faces. "And yet, you broke that promise." The general manager's head bowed even lower. The receptionist's hands shook so violently that she knocked over a pen holder. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the suffocating silence. A couple of guests near the bar exchanged uneasy glances. Unsure whether to leave or stay, the man took another deliberate step forward, his calm presence somehow more intimidating than shouting. "Tell me," he said softly, "when did you decide who was worthy of service here? When did appearance replace hospitality?" No one dared to respond. A housekeeper in the back sniffled, while trying to hold back tears. The The man turned his gaze to her, and she quickly looked down, ashamed. He exhaled slowly, the sound deliberate, filling the stillness of the grand lobby. The general manager finally spoke, his voice shaking. "Sir, please. We will retrain the staff. This will never happen again." The man's jaw tightened. "Retraining?" he repeated, his tone icy. He took out his phone, his thumb gliding across the screen. Every eye followed the movement, breaths held tight in anticipation. A faint chime rang out as he pressed a button, and moments later, a voice answered from the speaker. "Mr. Harrington?" the voice said, respectful and cautious. "Yes," the man replied calmly, his eyes still fixed on the staff. "This property," he said, "is shutting down for inspection, effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the room. The general manager's face went white, his lips parting in shock. "Sir, please, this will ruin us," he whispered. The man's piercing eyes met his, blinking. "You ruined yourselves," he said firmly. The phone clicked as he ended the call. Panic spread across the staff. Whispers filled the air, mingled with the pounding rain outside. The man turned toward the glass doors, his movements unhurried, as if he carried the weight of an empire effortlessly. No one moved to stop him. No one dared. He paused at the entrance, glancing back at the grand chandelier that glimmered above the trembling staff. The light reflected off his calm but unreadable face. Then he pushed open the door and stepped back into the storm. Leaving the once proud lobby frozen in shame, the sound of rain swallowed the silence behind him. But his presence lingered, heavier than the storm outside. Continue where you stop. ChatGPT said. The storm raged through the night, lashing against the hotel's towering glass facade, but inside, the staff barely slept. Fear hung over them like a suffocating blanket. By morning, the grand lobby that once glimmered with confidence was quiet, its gold accents dulled under gray daylight. The phones rang incessantly, corporate offices, news reporters, guests demanding answers. The receptionist from the night before sat rigid at her desk, her hands cold, her smile forced but shaky. The general manager stood near the entrance, pacing his tie loose, sweat gathering at his brow. And then, black cars pulled up, one after another. Doors swung open, and men and women in sharp suits stepped out, clipboards in hand, their expressions unreadable. Corporate investigators, inspectors, executives from the highest level of the company. The staff stiffened as the team strode into the lobby, their polished shoes clicking against the marble. The general manager rushed forward, attempting a greeting, but the lead inspector cut him off. "We are here to conduct a full audit," she said coolly, effective immediately. Her words were like ice water poured over the already panicked team. She handed him a sealed letter. The general manager's hands trembled as he opened it. His face drained of color as he read the words. The hotel was officially under suspension. The staff would be interviewed. Every policy would be reviewed, and every single complaint against them would be brought to light. Guests whispered among themselves, phones raised discreetly to capture the scene. The once confident staff stood frozen, no longer able to hide behind forced smiles or polite words. The receptionist's eyes flicked nervously to the gold-framed portrait of the man they had turned away. His painted gaze seemed to pierce through her, reminding her of her actions. The bellboy from the night before was called forward first, his voice cracking under questioning. I did not know who he was," he whispered. The inspector's gaze was sharp. "And if he had been just another guest," she asked, "would you have treated him better?" He swallowed hard, his face pale. The tension in the room grew thicker with every passing moment. The general manager's hands shook as he tried to address the team. "We must cooperate," he said weakly, but his voice carried no authority anymore. The staff exchanged frightened glances, the weight of their actions pressing down like a crushing tide. Suddenly the glass doors swung open, and there he was. The man they had humiliated. This time he was not in a rain-soaked coat. He was dressed sharply in a dark tailored suit, his presence radiating power. Every conversation in the lobby stopped. The investigators turned to greet him with respect, bowing their heads slightly. The staff froze, their breath catching in their throats. His expression was calm, but there was no warmth in his eyes. He stepped forward slowly, each stride echoing like thunder through the silent room. He stopped in the center of the lobby. Standing directly beneath the grand chandelier, its golden light cascaded over him, making him seem taller, more imposing than before. His gaze swept across the room. Moving from one frightened employee to another, not a single person dared to breathe. Too loudly, even the inspectors stood a little straighter. Sensing the weight of his authority, the man adjusted his cufflinks with deliberate calm, the soft click of metal echoing in the tense silence. Then he spoke. "When I built this hotel chain," said his voice steady and deep, "I wanted it to be more than luxury, more than chandeliers, marble floors, and expensive artwork." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I wanted it to stand for dignity, respect, hospitality." His eyes locked on the receptionist. She flinched, her hands clasping tightly in front of her. And yet he continued, his tone sharpening. "I was turned away from my own doors because I did not look wealthy enough for you." A soft gasp rippled through the crowd of employees. The general manager's face burned red, sweat dripping down his temple. The man turned his gaze on him. "And you," he said coldly, "you allowed it. You encouraged it. You saw me as a burden, not as a guest." The general manager opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The man's voice grew louder, filling every corner of the grand lobby. "This is not just about me. This is about every guest you have ever dismissed. Every person you have made feel small. Every time you chose arrogance over service." He gestured toward the guests who had been watching silently, their eyes wide. "This hotel does not exist for you to feel powerful over others. It exists to serve, to welcome, to protect." His voice cut like steel. "And you have all failed." Awesome. Staff members lowered their heads, tears welling in their eyes. The inspectors began taking notes rapidly, their pens scratching against paper. The man straightened, his calm demeanor returning, but his eyes remained cold. "As of this moment," he declared, "this management team is relieved of duty." The general manager staggered backward, his mouth falling open in shock. The receptionist's hands flew to her mouth as she gasped. The man gestured to one of the inspectors, who immediately stepped forward. "Effective today, this property will undergo full restructuring. Every employee will be reviewed, every policy rewritten. Those who treated guests with kindness will remain. Those who did not will leave." A heavy silence fell. No one dared to move. The man turned toward the grand doors, his presence commanding the entire room. As he walked forward, guests parted silently to make way, some bowing their heads out of respect. The sound of his shoes striking the marble floor echoed through the space like a drumbeat. Just as he reached the doors, he stopped and glanced over his shoulder. His voice was calm, but the power in his words sent a chill through everyone present. "Remember this moment," he said, "because it is the day everything changes." He pushed open the glass doors, stepping into the bright daylight, leaving behind a hotel full of trembling employees and stunned guests. The storm had cleared, but his presence felt heavier than the night before. The news spread like wildfire. By evening, headlines blazed across every screen. Hotel chain owner exposes staff for turning him away. Videos recorded by guests went viral, showing the quiet yet devastating confrontation. Comments poured in from around the world praising his humility and condemning the arrogance of the staff. Within days, the hotel closed its doors for a full overhaul. The staff who had mocked him were dismissed. New leadership was brought in, trained to serve every guest with respect, regardless of appearance, but for the man. It was not about revenge. It was about restoring the values he had built his empire upon. Weeks later, the hotel reopened. The grand chandelier shone brighter than ever. But this time, so did the faces of those who worked beneath it. Guests were greeted with genuine smiles, warm welcomes, and open arms. the portrait of the man still hung in the lobby. A reminder to every employee of the lesson learned that night. And though he rarely visited, his presence lingered in every polished tile and golden light, because that single act of quiet power had transformed not just a hotel, but an entire culture of respect, and those who had once trembled in shame now worked with pride, ensuring no guest ever felt unwelcome again.